I used to believe every family had one locked door, one subject nobody touched, one memory nobody opened, one truth that stayed buried because it kept the house standing. In my family, the locked door was always my father's temper, my mother's silence, and the way we all pretended that quiet meant peace. For years, I told myself I was just like everyone else. A simple man. A routine man. The kind of man people trust with keys to the office, keys to the car, keys to the front door. The kind of man who shows up early, speaks politely, keeps his opinions small, and never gives anyone a reason to look twice. That's what I trained myself to be. Because if anybody looked twice, they might start noticing the places I tried too hard to keep smooth. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 61 years old. I've been married twice. I've buried one wife and almost lost the second, not to death, but to the one thing that scares people more than grief. Truth. If you saw me at the grocery store, you'd never stop me in the aisle and say, "You look like a man carrying a secret." You'd just see a man comparing cereal boxes like his biggest worry was sugar. That's the trick. Secrets don't usually announce themselves. They hide inside ordinary habits. Mine hid in a cardboard box. It sat on the top shelf of the closet in my home office, wedged behind old tax folders, a dusty photo album, and a coat I hadn't worn since my first job. The box was nothing special. No lock. No warning label. No dramatic tape like you see in movies. Just a plain brown box. But I treated it like it could explode. Every time my brother came over and said, "Hey, can I use your bathroom?" my stomach tightened like a fist. Every time my sister-in-law wandered into my office and joked, "You always keep things so neat," I moved myself between her and that closet without thinking. And every time I heard the words, "We're coming to visit," I mentally measured the distance between the front door and that shelf. Because my family has a talent. They can find anything. They find the extra dessert you tried to hide in the fridge. They find the receipts you forgot to throw away. They find the one sentence you didn't mean to say at Thanksgiving and replay it for 10 years. So, I didn't just keep a secret. I kept it under surveillance. I didn't even open the box often. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside the way you know what's behind your own ribs. Still, once in a while, usually late at night, after the television had gone dark and the neighborhood quieted, I would take it down carefully and place it on the desk like something sacred. The first time I ever put anything into that box, I was 9 years old. It started with a costume. Not the kind of costume you buy in a plastic package with a picture on the front. This was older than that, something with real fabric, real seams, and a faint smell of perfume that didn't belong to me. My oldest cousin, Melissa, had brought a trunk of clothes to my grandmother's house one October. She was cleaning out her apartment, she said. Vintage stuff, she called it, the way people do when they don't want to admit it's just old. To me, it was treasure. There were shawls and gloves and a few dresses that looked like they belonged in a black and white film. I remember touching the fabric and feeling a strange combination of curiosity and dread, like I'd picked up something valuable that wasn't meant for my hands. I'd always been the quiet child in a loud family. My mother had 3 sisters. They all had voices that filled rooms. They wore bright lipstick. They laughed hard, fought hard, and hugged like they were trying to keep each other from falling off the earth. When you grow up surrounded by women like that, you learn the rhythm of their world. You learn the way they talk over each other. You learn their perfume brands before you learn your multiplication tables. You learn how quickly a room can go silent if you say the wrong thing. And you learn, very early, that some interests are for them, and some are for you. But I didn't feel like my interests belonged to either side. That October afternoon, when the adults were in the kitchen arguing about whether the turkey should be thawed in the sink, I stood in the hallway staring at that trunk like it was calling me. My cousin Melissa caught me looking. She didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She just tilted her head, studied me for a second, and said, "Do you want to try something on? It's just fabric. It's just fabric." That sentence should have been nothing. But it was the first time an adult had given me permission to be curious without making me feel ashamed for it. I nodded. She led me into the guest room and closed the door. I remember the click of the latch. I remember the way my heart started beating, as if I'd just committed a crime. The dress she chose was simple blue, with small white buttons down the front. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't revealing.
It was just ordinary.
Which somehow made it feel more powerful. She helped me step into it, and the fabric slid over my shoulders like water. It didn't feel like a joke. It didn't feel like a dare. It felt this is the only word that fits quietly right. I looked in the mirror and expected to feel silly. Instead, I felt calm. And that terrified me, because calm meant I wasn't pretending. When Melissa opened the door and I heard voices in the hallway, I snapped back to reality. I pulled the dress off so fast I almost tore a button. I folded it, hands shaking, and put it back the way it was, as if returning it to the trunk could rewind time. Melissa didn't push. She didn't lecture. She just said, "If you ever want to talk about feelings that don't make sense yet, you can." Then she walked out like nothing happened. I spent the next 20 years trying to convince myself that nothing had happened. Life moved forward the way it always does: school, work, responsibility. And for a while, I thought the moment in my grandmother's guest room would fade into the kind of memory you can laugh about when you're older. But certain memories don't fade. They wait. In my teenage years, my family moved into a bigger house. My parents called it an upgrade. My father called it an investment. My mother called it a place to breathe. I got the attic bedroom, a third-floor space with slanted ceilings, a small window, and the kind of creaky stairs that announce every step you take. It felt like a world away from the rest of the house. I loved it for that reason. What I didn't know was that the attic also doubled as storage. My mother stored boxes up there, photo albums, old Christmas decorations, and clothes she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Dresses from another era. Blouses folded in tissue paper. A few things with price tags still attached, like she'd bought a life she never got to live. The first time I opened one of those boxes, I told myself it was only curiosity. I told myself the same lie the second time. Then the third. I learned the house's sleeping patterns. I learned the timing of the pipes. I learned which floorboards squeaked and which ones didn't. I learned how to move like a shadow in my own home. And on certain nights, when everyone was asleep and the television downstairs had gone quiet, I would open those boxes and hold pieces of my mother's past like they were fragile. I never took anything out of the attic. I never wore anything outside that room. I never told anyone. But something changed inside me during those nights, something I didn't have language for then. It wasn't about being different for the sake of it. It wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about attention. It was about relief. The world expected me to play a role. Strong son. Future man. Don't cry. Be tough. Stop overthinking. In that attic, alone, the pressure eased. For a few minutes, I could breathe without performing. And then, like clockwork, the guilt came rushing in. I'd fold everything back exactly as I found it. I'd hide the evidence. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, promising myself it would never happen again. It always happened again. By the time I left for college, I'd built a whole system: rules, limitations, excuses. The stricter I made the rules, the more I convinced myself I had control. Then college hit and the system collapsed, not because I was caught, but because I didn't have access to the one place where I felt that quiet relief. Dorm rooms don't have attics. Roommates don't sleep the way families do. Life is loud when you're young and surrounded by other young people trying to become something. I buried the feeling again. I dated. I studied. I tried to be normal with the intensity of a man trying to hold a dam together with his bare hands. After college, I got married. Her name was Claire. Claire had a laugh that made strangers turn and smile. She had that kind of warmth that makes you want to be better just to deserve it. I loved her deeply. And if you think love automatically erases complicated truths, you've never been married. The first time I felt the old pull while living with Claire, I panicked. I told myself marriage meant I had to be fixed.
But the pull didn't go away.
It only became more dangerous because it was now living next to another person's trust. I started doing something I'm not proud of, not because it was outrageous, but because it was dishonest. On nights when Claire fell asleep early, I would lock myself in the bathroom for a few minutes. I'd move quietly, like a thief. I'd choose clothing that looked ordinary because anything that looked too much would feel like crossing a line I couldn't cross back over.
A blouse.
A simple skirt. Sometimes a cardigan. I wasn't chasing shock. I wasn't trying to turn my life into chaos. I was trying to touch that old sense of calm, like a man who keeps going back to a well even though he's afraid of what people would say if they saw him drinking. I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror for a minute and feel my shoulders drop. Then I'd hear a sound, Claire shifting in bed, the floor creaking, the house settling, and I'd rush to undo everything before the world noticed. That was my marriage for years. Love, work, routine, and a private storm I refused to name. Eventually, the storm turned into grief.
Claire got sick.
It happened the way these things often happen. A small symptom, a doctor's appointment, a word nobody wants to hear.
We fought for time.
We hoped. We prayed. We did all the human things people do when they're desperate. She died on a Sunday morning in late spring. After the funeral, people told me I was strong.
People always say that.
They said it like strength was a gift, not a burden. They said it like I could carry my own sorrow without collapsing because I had the right kind of shoulders. When the house emptied out and the food people brought started to spoil in the fridge, I realized something. Grief makes a home echo. In that echo, every secret gets louder. I moved into a small apartment a year later. It was the first time in my adult life that I lived alone. Friends assumed it would be lonely.
It was.
But it was also quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. For a while, I told myself I could finally breathe again, that I could finally explore the part of me I'd been hiding since childhood without harming anyone. I bought a few pieces of clothing, nothing extreme, nothing meant to provoke. I wasn't building a fantasy. I was building a private corner of peace. I kept it all in that same brown box. Then, one afternoon, my mother called and said, "Your brother is coming by your place this weekend. He wants to help you with your shelves." I stared at the box. I stared at it the way you stare at something that could ruin you if it opens at the wrong time. I had 2 days. 2 days to decide what kind of man I was going to be. The kind who hides forever. Or the kind who finally tells the truth to anyone before the truth gets dragged into daylight against his will. And that's when I made the mistake that set everything in motion. Because instead of moving the box, instead of burying it deeper, I did something I had never done before. I opened it in the middle of the day. I took one item out, held it in my hands, and said out loud alone in my apartment, "I can't keep living like this." And right then, I heard a sound at the front door.
A key.
Turning in the lock. Someone was coming in. Someone who was not supposed to see what I was holding. And in that single second, I understood something with absolute clarity. My secret wasn't hidden anymore. It was exposed before I even had the courage to choose how to reveal it. The key turned once then again, like whoever was outside couldn't decide whether to come in quietly or make a point. I froze with that piece of clothing still in my hands, my brain flipping through excuses the way a man flips through old receipts, hoping one of them will suddenly become proof. The door opened. "Danny," my brother's voice called out, casual, familiar, the exact tone he used when he expected to find nothing unusual. Mark stepped inside carrying a small toolbox in one hand and a paper bag in the other. He was the kind of man who always brought something with him: tools, snacks, advice. He never walked into a room empty-handed, as if being useful was the only way he knew how to exist. I didn't answer quickly enough. He took 2 more steps, then stopped. I saw his eyes land on the open box on my desk, on the item in my hands, on the part of the truth I hadn't managed to hide. For a second, neither of us moved. I felt like my entire life was balanced on the thin edge of his next expression. Mark didn't look angry.
He didn't look amused.
He looked confused, as if he'd walked into the wrong apartment. "What's that?" he asked. The question was simple, but it landed like a heavy object in the middle of my chest. I started. My throat tightened. I tried again. "It's something I keep." Mark's gaze moved from my hands to my face. He had my father's eyes, which always seemed to be measuring something. A man who grew up in our house learned to read eyes before words. "You okay?" he said. That might have been the kindest thing he could have asked. And it almost broke me. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about clothes. I was thinking about everything behind them, the years of hiding, the fear of being laughed at, the dread of my mother crying, the certainty that our family would turn my private relief into a public joke. Mark set the toolbox down slowly. He didn't move closer, and I noticed that. He gave me space. I wasn't trying to snoop, he said, as if he needed to protect himself from the idea that he had violated something. You left the door unlocked. I stared at him. My mind was screaming at me to lie. Say it was a costume. Say it belonged to someone else. Say you were holding it for a friend. Say anything. But I was tired of lying. The years had worn the lies down to threads. It's mine, I said. Mark blinked, once slow. Okay. That okay didn't mean understanding. It meant he was trying not to make it worse. My hands trembled. I put the item back into the box carefully, as if the fabric had feelings. Then I sat down because my knees suddenly didn't trust me. Mark pulled out the chair across from my desk and sat, but he didn't lean in like a detective. He sat like a brother who didn't know what to do with his hands. How long? He asked. I looked at the floor. A long time. Mark's jaw worked like he was chewing on a thought he didn't want to swallow. Claire knew. The name hit me like a wave. I swallowed hard. No. Mark nodded, slowly. I could almost see him doing mental arithmetic. Marriage years, grief years, the gaps where he'd assumed he knew my life. You're telling me now? He said. I didn't plan to, I admitted. I didn't plan to tell anyone. You just walked in. Mark exhaled through his nose, a half-laugh that wasn't funny. Yeah. I have a talent for timing. We sat there in silence. The apartment felt smaller than it had a minute earlier. Then Mark did something I didn't expect. He stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and put the paper bag down. He took out 2 coffees and set one near me, like he was trying to return us to something normal. I brought you a sandwich too, he said. Figured you'd forget to eat. I stared at the coffee like it was a miracle. Because I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, and none of them included my brother feeding me like I was still his little brother, not a strange man with a strange secret. Mark sat back down. I'm not going to tell Mom, he said. My breath caught. He held up a hand. Listen, I'm not saying I get it. I'm not saying I'm comfortable. I'm saying I'm not going to turn your life into a family meeting. The weight in my chest shifted, not gone, but less crushing. Thanks, I managed. Mark nodded once, firm. But you need to think about this, he said, voice steady now, practical. Because you can't live like you're hiding a crime. I flinched at the word. Mark noticed and softened. You know what I mean. I did. The next few hours were awkward, but strangely gentle. Mark fixed the shelves like he'd promised, and we talked about small things: work, the neighborhood, the way grocery prices had become ridiculous. He didn't ask more questions. He didn't joke. He didn't poke the bruise. When he left, he paused at the door. Danny, he said. I looked up. If you ever want to talk, I'll try, he said. I can't promise I'll say the right thing, but I'm not your enemy. Then he walked out. I stood there alone with the box still open on my desk, the air in the apartment feeling different, as if it had finally seen me. That night, I didn't open the box again. I didn't need to. Mark knowing should have made me feel exposed. Instead, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Possible. But possibility can be dangerous. It can make you do things you're not ready for. 2 months later, I met Evelyn. I met her in the least romantic way possible, a community center meeting about neighborhood repairs. The kind of meeting where everyone complains about potholes and the one man in the back insists the world is falling apart because nobody respects street signs anymore. Evelyn was sitting alone, taking notes with a pen that looked too elegant for a folding chair. She had silver-streaked hair pulled back neatly and eyes that didn't dart around the room. They settled on things, like she was truly seeing them. When it was my turn to speak, I said something ordinary about the broken streetlights on Maple Drive. Nothing clever. After the meeting, she caught up with me by the exit. Daniel, right? She said. I nodded, surprised she remembered. You were the only person in there who didn't sound like you wanted to fight the entire city, she said, and there was a small smile in her voice. I laughed, more out of relief than humor. I've done enough fighting. Her eyes held mine for half a second longer than polite conversation required. Yeah, she said softly. So have I. That was the moment something in me leaned forward. Evelyn and I started with coffee. Then dinner. Then long walks where you talk about nothing and everything at the same time. She was widowed too, and she didn't wear her grief like a badge. She wore it like a scar present real, but not the only thing she was. A year later, we married. Some people thought it was fast. But when you're older, you don't waste time pretending you have unlimited seasons. I loved Evelyn for many reasons. Her patience, her humor, the way she listened without preparing her reply, the way she didn't try to fix me because she knew some things aren't broken, just complicated. Still, I didn't tell her. Not before the wedding. Not after. I tried, though. I rehearsed. I practiced sentences in my car like a man preparing for a trial. There's something I've never told anyone. I've carried this since childhood. I need you to hear me before you judge me. Every time, I lost my nerve. Because I wasn't afraid Evelyn would scream. I was afraid she would go quiet. Quiet is what my mother did when she couldn't accept something. Quiet can be a kind of rejection that doesn't leave fingerprints. So I kept the box hidden. I kept my routines. I kept smiling at family events, hugging nieces, shaking hands, playing the role of Daniel Harper, dependable and dull. And for a while it worked, until the night Evelyn cleaned the office. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were her reset, days she'd put on soft music, open the windows, and treat the house like it could be refreshed with enough effort. I was in the living room reading, half asleep in the chair, when I heard the closet door in my office slide open. My eyes snapped up so fast my neck hurt. I told myself she was just organizing papers, throwing out old envelopes, moving the coats. But my body didn't believe that lie. I walked down the hallway, trying not to look like a man rushing toward a disaster, trying to keep my pace normal, trying to look like I trusted my own home. When I reached the office doorway, I stopped. Evelyn was standing on a chair, reaching toward the top shelf. The brown box was already in her hands. And she turned her head toward me with a bright, harmless smile, the kind of smile you give when you think you've found something adorable and forgotten. Daniel, she said, what is this? My throat went dry. I couldn't speak. Evelyn's smile faded just a little, replaced by that careful expression she wore when she sensed she was stepping into someone else's private space. I wasn't trying to pry, she said immediately. It just fell forward. I caught it. I stared at the box like it was a snake between us. My mind screamed, take it. Close it.
Lie.
Say it's memorabilia. Say it's Claire's. Say it's nothing. But Evelyn was watching me. And Evelyn wasn't my mother. She wasn't my brother. She wasn't a stranger. She was my wife. If I lied now, I wasn't protecting myself. I was poisoning the marriage. I walked into the room slowly and held out my hands. Evelyn hesitated, then gave me the box. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't dramatic. It was just truth in cardboard form. I set it on the desk. Evelyn stepped down from the chair and stood near the doorway, not close enough to touch me, not far enough to leave.
Talk to me, she said.
2 simple words. No anger. No accusation. Just an invitation. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I've been afraid of this moment, I said finally. Evelyn's eyes softened. Okay, she said. Then start at the beginning. I opened my mouth. And for the first time in my life, I was about to tell someone the whole story, the costume, the attic, the years of silence, the calm and the shame, the grief, the box, the way I'd tried to bury part of myself because I thought it was the only way to be loved. But before I could speak, Evelyn glanced down at the box and said something that made my blood run cold. Daniel, why does this have a label? I looked, and I realized, with a sick twist in my stomach, that I had forgotten something. There was a shipping label on the side of the box. A fresh one, with my full name, and an address I didn't recognize. Evelyn looked from the label back to my face, confusion turning into a sharper question. Where did this come from? She asked. And in that second, I knew I wasn't just explaining a secret anymore. I was explaining a mistake I didn't even fully understand myself. Because I had never ordered anything to this house. Not like that. Not under my name. Not to an address I couldn't place. So, why was my name on that label? And who else might have that address? Evelyn's finger traced the shipping label like she was reading a bruise. Daniel, she said again, slower this time, this isn't an old box. This label is new. I stepped closer and felt my stomach drop, as if the floor had moved. The label wasn't faded. The ink hadn't softened. The corners weren't frayed. It looked like something printed yesterday, clean, confident, official. My full name, a return address I didn't recognize, and a delivery date that made no sense. I didn't order anything, I said, and the moment the words left my mouth, I realized how guilty they sounded. Evelyn didn't react with suspicion the way most people do. She reacted with concern. That's why I'm asking, she said. Because I know you. And your face right now, you look like you're trying to remember something you don't want to remember. I put the box on the desk and forced myself to breathe. My hands hovered over the flaps, but didn't open them. A strange instinct told me that if I opened it in front of her, I'd be admitting to something I still didn't fully understand. I need you to hear me, I said. Evelyn nodded. I'm here. That simple sentence, no threat, no sarcasm, nearly unraveled me. I sat down because standing felt like pretending I was in control. I've carried something since I was a child, I began. It isn't a crime. It isn't meant to hurt anyone. But I've been ashamed of it for most of my life, and shame makes you do foolish things. Evelyn stayed quiet, but her eyes didn't leave mine. She didn't look away to make it easier for me to hide. So I told her, not with dramatic language, not with excuses, just the truth, as cleanly as I could manage. I told her about my grandmother's house, the trunk. The first time I felt calm in a way I hadn't expected. I told her about the attic bedroom, the storage boxes, the years of sneaking around like a frightened boy, even when I'd grown into a man. I told her how, after Claire died, I lived alone for the first time and finally stopped fighting myself every hour of every day. I didn't describe anything in a way meant to shock. I didn't turn it into something sensational. I explained it the way you explain grief or loneliness, something complicated that lives inside a person, whether the world approves or not. When I finished, I waited for the quiet I feared most. Evelyn's voice, when it came, was steady. So this box, she said, it's a place you've been hiding pieces of yourself. I swallowed. Yes. She nodded once, slowly, like she was filing away facts so she could respond with care. Then she looked down at the shipping label again. But this part, she said, tapping the label lightly, doesn't match the rest of the story. I stared at the label as if it might explain itself if I stared long enough. That address, I said, I've never seen it before. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted. Are you sure? I hated how quickly my voice rose. I'm sure. She didn't flinch. She just watched me the way you watch someone standing too close to the edge of a staircase. Then either someone sent this to you, she said, or someone sent it as you. My chest tightened. Those words opened a door I didn't want to walk through. Because there was only one person in my life who knew the box existed besides me.
Mark.
But Mark wouldn't do that. Would he? I grabbed my phone with shaky fingers and called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. No answer. Evelyn didn't crowd me, but I could feel her presence like a steady hand on my shoulder. Tell me what you're thinking, she said. I hesitated. My brother knows, I admitted. He walked in on it months ago. But he promised he wouldn't tell anyone. Evelyn's face didn't change. No judgment. No anger. Just a sharper focus. Could he have sent something? She asked. I don't think so, I said. He's blunt, but he's not cruel. Evelyn nodded, considering. Then she asked the question that made my throat close again. Daniel, she said, is there anyone else, anyone at all who might have seen you at some point? Not Mark. Someone from your past. My mind snapped back through years like a film reel burning too fast. High school.
college,
old neighbors, coworkers. And then, without warning, I remembered a face I hadn't thought of in decades. A man named Peter Lang. He'd worked with me during my first job after college, same department, same gray carpets, same fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Peter was the kind of man who never smiled with his eyes. He laughed a lot, but his laughter always carried a hook in it, like he was waiting for something to snag. One night, years ago, long after everyone had left the office, I'd gone back to retrieve a folder from my desk. The elevator doors opened on my floor, and I stepped out into silence. Peter was there. Not at his desk. Near the supply closet. He looked startled to see me. "What are you doing here so late?" he asked. I remember the way he said it, not casual, not curious, but interested. Like he'd been hoping no one would show up. "I forgot something," I told him. Peter's eyes flicked behind me, toward the elevator, as if checking who else might step out. "Yeah," he said. "Sure." That night had stayed in my mind like a loose nail, but I'd never known why.
Until now.
Evelyn watched my expression change and moved closer, not into my space, but close enough that I could feel I wasn't alone in this. "You know who did this," she said quietly. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I know who it could be." I set the phone down and stared at the box. The box wasn't just a box anymore. It was a message. Evelyn's voice was calm. "We can open it together," she offered. My heart hammered. What if it's meant to embarrass me? Evelyn didn't sugarcoat it. "Then it's meant to control you." That word control landed hard. Because shame had controlled me for most of my life. And I had promised myself I wouldn't hand the steering wheel to anyone else. I placed both hands on the box flaps. Evelyn stood beside me now. Not behind me.
Beside me.
I opened it. Inside, neatly wrapped in tissue paper, was an item I didn't recognize, something I had never bought, never touched, never even searched for. There was also a small envelope, perfectly centered, as if placed there with deliberate care. No return name. Just my name, handwritten in black ink. Daniel Harper. Evelyn didn't touch anything. She waited for me to decide. I picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive. The handwriting wasn't shaky. It was confident, almost elegant, like the person who wrote it enjoyed the moment. I tore it open. One folded sheet. 3 short lines. That was all it took to make my skin go cold. Because the note didn't accuse me. It didn't threaten me outright. It did something worse. It proved the writer knew exactly where to aim. It read, "I remember the attic. I remember the quiet. Call me before your family does." My hand started to shake, so hard the paper rattled. Evelyn read it over my shoulder. I felt her inhale sharply, not out of disgust, but recognition of danger. "This is blackmail," she said, voice firm. I stared at the words like they might rearrange themselves into something harmless. "I haven't spoken to anyone," I said, almost to myself. "I haven't told anyone. How does someone know about an attic?" Evelyn's gaze lifted from the note to me. "Because," she said slowly, "someone has been watching you longer than you think." The room felt suddenly too bright, too exposed. The house that had always been my safe place began to feel like a stage. I looked at Evelyn. "We can't tell my family." Evelyn's answer was immediate. "We're not telling your family tonight." That "tonight" should have comforted me. Instead, it made me realize something. There was a timeline, a deadline. And whoever wrote that note had already decided how the story would end unless I did something first. I reached for my phone again. This time, I didn't call Mark. I typed the address from the label into a map search. A location popped up across town. Not a home. Not a business anyone would casually visit. It was a storage facility. Evelyn leaned in to see the screen. "Why would someone send you a box from a storage facility?" I stared at the address, my mind racing. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. No name. No photo. Just a vibration that felt like a knock on a locked door. Evelyn looked at me. "Don't answer if you're not ready." My thumb hovered over the screen. If I didn't answer, maybe it would stop. If I did answer, I might be stepping into a trap. But the note had said, "Call me before your family does." And that meant the next move might not be mine. The buzzing stopped. Then, 1 second later, a new message appeared. A text. One sentence. And when I read it, my blood turned to ice, because it wasn't written like a stranger. It was written like someone who knew me well enough to sound like family. It said, "Daniel, your mother is coming over tomorrow. Should I tell her what I know, or will you?" The next part of the story can't be more of the same. If Daniel answers that text, he hands control to a stranger. If he ignores it, the stranger escalates. Either way, tomorrow becomes a trap. Evelyn didn't panic. She got very still, the way people get when they've survived something before. "Put the phone down," she said, not softly, not harshly. "Read it again, word for word." I did. "Daniel, your mother is coming over tomorrow. Should I tell her what I know, or will you?" Evelyn watched my face while I read, like she was mapping the fear in it. "This isn't just someone who knows a secret," she said. "This is someone who wants power. They're trying to rush you. That means we slow everything down." "I can't slow down," I said. My voice sounded thin, even to me. "My mother, if she finds out from someone else." Evelyn raised a hand. "Listen to me. We are not letting anyone set the pace of your life. Not at 61. That did something to me. Not comfort, exactly. More like a spine returning to a body that had been folding in on itself for years." I stared at the open box on the desk. The tissue paper looked innocent. The note did not. "I never told anyone about the attic," I said. "Not even Mark. How can somebody use that word?" Evelyn leaned over the desk, careful not to touch the contents, and scanned the box again as if it were a crime scene. "The attic is the anchor," she said. "They picked the one detail that proves it's real. It's meant to make you think. They know everything. But they probably don't. They know one or two things, and they're bluffing the rest." I wanted to believe her, but the text felt personal. Too personal. "Whoever it is," I said, "they want me to react." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Then we don't." She walked to the window and looked out at the street the way someone checks for headlights. Then she turned back and made a decision with her whole face. "Tonight we do 3 things," she said. "We protect you. We protect this house. And we protect the truth from being twisted." I swallowed.
How?
Evelyn held up one finger. "First, we don't respond to the number. Not once. If you respond, you confirm you're scared. And fear is what they're buying." My mouth went dry. "But what if they message my mother?" "Second," she continued unfazed, "we control tomorrow. Your mother can come, but she won't be alone with you. I will be here. Mark will be here if you want. We keep it normal." I flinched at Mark's name. Evelyn caught it. "Or not Mark," she said, "but someone. You don't sit in a room alone with pressure anymore." Then she held up a third finger. "Third," she said, "we figure out what that storage facility is. Because whoever sent this wants you to go there. That's the hook." I stared at her. "You think it's a setup?" "I think it's bait," she said. "And you don't bite bait when you don't know what's on the other end of the line." The calm in her voice almost made me angry, because it highlighted how little calm I'd had for most of my life. "This is my fault," I muttered. Evelyn's eyes sharpened.
No.
"Hiding isn't a crime. And being private isn't permission for someone to threaten you." That word again, threaten. She didn't sugarcoat it. She named it, and naming it made it smaller. I looked down at the box. "What if they have pictures?" Evelyn didn't blink. "Then we still don't panic. Because the truth isn't shameful just because someone tries to weaponize it." My chest tightened. "My family won't see it like that." Evelyn stepped closer. "Then your family will learn something new about love." The sentence landed like a match near dry paper. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, "You don't know my mother. You don't know the way she goes quiet. You don't know how my relatives turn discomfort into jokes and call it just teasing." But Evelyn's face didn't have doubt in it. It had strategy. She reached for my phone and turned it so we could both see. "Open the message thread," she said. I did. Evelyn studied the unknown number like it was a person standing in our doorway. "This is what we do," she said. "You take screenshots. You write down the time. You don't delete anything. If this gets worse, you'll want a record." It felt strange, collecting evidence like I was someone who had a right to safety. Like I wasn't just a man who deserved consequences. Evelyn picked up the envelope with a tissue, careful, thoughtful, as if she'd watched too many crime shows, then smiled at herself. I know, she said. It's dramatic. But I don't want her fingerprints all over this if we need to show anyone. Show who? I asked. Evelyn's gaze stayed level. If it becomes harassment, we report it. We don't handle it alone. The word report made my stomach lurch. I'd spent my life avoiding attention, not inviting it. Evelyn saw it. Daniel, reporting threats isn't making a scene. It's setting a boundary. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text. Same number. Shorter. Don't pretend you didn't read my message. My heart slammed against my ribs. Evelyn's voice stayed calm, but her eyes hardened. Good, she said. Now we know they're impatient. I whispered, what if they really tell my mother tomorrow? Evelyn turned toward the door of the office, as if the house itself needed instructions. Then tomorrow becomes your moment, she said. Not theirs. I stared at her. You mean, I should tell my mother? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She chose her words carefully, like she was stepping around broken glass. I mean, she said, if your mother is going to hear anything, she hears it from you with dignity, in your language, on your terms. Not from a coward with a phone. My hands started to shake again, not from fear now, but from the idea of standing up and letting the truth exist in the open air. Evelyn placed her hand gently on my wrist. Grounding, not controlling. You don't have to explain your whole life, she said. You don't have to defend yourself like you're on trial. You tell her one sentence. Just one. My voice cracked. What sentence? Evelyn leaned closer and spoke like she was writing the words into my bones. Mom, she said, there's something personal I've carried for many years. It doesn't change my love for you, and it doesn't harm anyone. But someone is trying to use it to scare me. I wanted you to hear it from me first, because I respect you. I repeated it silently. The sentence felt like a bridge made of thin wood. Terrifying. Necessary. Evelyn stepped back and pointed toward the brown box. And this, she said, stays here. Locked away. Not because it's wrong, because someone's trying to turn it into a weapon. I nodded. We stood there for a long moment, listening to the house breathe. Then Evelyn did something I didn't expect. She opened a drawer, pulled out a small metal cash box, the kind people keep passports in, and set it on the desk. I bought this after my first husband died, she said quietly, because grief taught me people don't always respect privacy. I looked at her. I didn't tell you that, she added. It was the first time I saw a flicker of her own buried fear. And suddenly, I understood something. This wasn't just my crisis. It was our marriage being tested by a stranger who thought secrets were weak points. Evelyn opened the cash box. Inside was nothing dramatic, just papers, a spare key, a little stack of cash. She nodded toward the brown box. Put everything in here. The note, too. I hesitated. What if we need it? We have screenshots, Evelyn said. We'll photograph the note. Then it goes away. I took a photo of the handwriting. Close enough to show the ink, the pressure, the slight slant. Then I folded the note again, carefully. Not because I respected the person who wrote it, but because I was done being frantic. I put it inside the cash box. Evelyn closed the lid and turned the key. The click of the lock sounded like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. Then she looked up at me and said the sentence that truly shifted the night. Now, she said, we call Mark. I stiffened. Evelyn held my gaze. He already knows part of the truth. If he's loyal, he proves it. If he's involved, we learn it. That possibility made me nauseous. But Evelyn was right. This wasn't just about a secret anymore. It was about who had access to my life. I dialed Mark again. This time, he answered on the second ring. Danny, he said, breathless. I was just about to call you. My stomach dropped.
Why?
Mark's voice was tense. Because Mom called me. She said she's coming to your house tomorrow. I stared at Evelyn. Evelyn didn't look surprised. Mark continued, And she said something weird, Danny. She said she heard you've been hiding a double life. Her words, not mine.
My mouth went dry.
Evelyn mouthed. Who told her? I couldn't speak. Mark's voice lowered. Danny, did someone contact you? I looked at the locked cash box. I looked at my phone. I looked at Evelyn, who stood calm as stone. And I realized the stranger hadn't waited for tomorrow. They had already fired the first shot. Mark, I said, my voice suddenly steady in a way that startled even me. I need you to tell me the truth. Is there anything you haven't told me about that day in my apartment? Silence on the line. Then Mark exhaled slow, heavy. Danny, he said, I didn't tell Mom. I swear I didn't. But there's something I didn't mention. My heart stopped. What? I whispered. Mark's voice came out like confession dragged over gravel. I wasn't the only one who saw the box that day. And before I could even ask who, Evelyn's phone rang. Not mine. Hers. Unknown number. She looked at the screen, then at me. And she answered, calm and cold. Hello, Evelyn said. A voice on the other end, male, controlled, almost friendly, said. Good evening, Evelyn Harper. Please tell Daniel he has until sunrise.